Tonight on Pia.
This is what you call catch of the day.
It makes no sense to me as a person to be farming Atlantic salmon in open net pens.
And this guy was swimming in the ocean an hour ago.
We're making sure 100% of their catch gets consumed in this province now at our member restaurants and elsewhere, instead of being flown to Japan every day in the belly of a 747.
I like the idea of eating locally. I like the idea of eating what's in season.
This is going to be fun. You are what you eat. That's the old familiar adage. And that pendulum swings both ways. As obesity rates skyrocket in our fast food culture with all that salt and sugar and fat, the opposite also holds true. More and more Canadians are bolting back to the foods of their forefathers, fresh, local, organic, and delicious. Of course, this kind of food needs to be cooked. We've developed a rather curious kind of cooking culture in our multimedia age. We obsessively watch food shows on TV. We spend large chunks of our disposable income on restaurant dining. But when it comes to actually making dinner in our own kitchens, we're probably a lot less competent than our grandmothers were. Eating makes us happy. As the economy droops, our living spaces shrink, and we work 24/7 to make the same money we used to make 9 to 5. Food comes to the rescue. Of all the pleasures of life, food is the most universal. It always makes us think of good health, good work, and good times.
Eating, we all have to eat. In fact, I say it's the only thing Canadians are still allowed to do 3 times a day.
Being around a table, it's noisy and loud, and you're all kind of sharing that experience together. You know, for me, food is so much about experience and, and memories and smells and all that sort of great stuff.
Bringing people into a room, cooking for them or with them, sharing great wine, lots of beer, and the unsung hero, especially having just returned from Germany where we had enough beer to refloat their navy.
If you grew up on a farm, you didn't abuse your animals or anything, and when you took the life of the animal, you didn't pray. It wasn't that type of spirituality, but you were connected to that food, and you respected it a lot more. If you raised an animal and killed the animal and then butchered it and had to process it, you are so connected to where your food's coming from. Now, no, I'm sure there's people out there that don't even realize beef comes from a cow or pork comes from a pig.
Most people love what they ate, what they remember eating when they were a kid growing up. And so, I think, for a Manhattanite, they can run into Whole Foods and pick up some Brussels sprouts, bring them back. Whether they're feeding their family or themselves, they have that sort of attachment to that emotional experience of eating Brussels sprouts.
There's a nice sign in our kitchen, you may recall. It said, there are 2 things for dinner this evening, take it or leave it.
In our family, when we started, is actually you got to pick the vegetables first, right? So you'd go out with your grandfather or my father, and you'd go to the garden and you'd pick the peas or the beans or the beets, whatever you were eating, and then you brought them back, and then you got to help my grandmother wash them. And then, eventually you got upgraded to you could actually peel them, the carrots, or clean the peas. Then you got upgraded to, okay, maybe you can put them in the boiling water and cook them, and then, it just evolved like that.
The buck stops with you and with me. As consumers, we better know that our political and economic clout depends more on what we buy than who we vote for. Uninformed eating is just so passé, darling. So you better know everything about what you put in your mouth.
Rob was a very early champion of sustainable fishery. He was the first partner with the Vancouver Aquarium.
At the time, in 1997, there was 64 commercially harvested species of seafood in British Columbia, and you might have saw 7 or 10 on any menu. And most of them didn't come from British Columbia. Most of them were imported. So we wanted to change that. That was our first focus.
This is what you call catch of the day. These are the beautiful sockeye salmon returning this year. So Robert Clark actually is going to be getting 20 of these tomorrow morning. Yep. Yeah. He's been a big fan of ours and us a fan of him. We're all about sustainable fishing and fishing for the future. We do a lot of work together. We fish prawns, and Rob's been a big advocate of the prawn fishery.
So I went from a chef, and most chefs are like this. It's you pick up the phone and you order, and you have your specifications about what you want, but there's a disconnect there somewhere. When you start to meet the fishermen or the divers or the shellfish farmers or whatever, and you meet the people that actually produce it or harvest it, it really creates a connection between not only you and the product, but you and the producer.
This guy was swimming in the ocean an hour ago. And the biggest difference with our fish, most people think of salmon are caught with a gill net or a seine boat. I'm a troller. I use hook and line. And the biggest thing about that is our fish come on board individually. And if there is a species on the hook that we're not allowed to keep, we put them back in the water alive. There's no mortality to our fishing.
The only goal we had in the early years at sea was we wanted people to know where their food came from. And simply ask that question, where did this halibut come from? Where did this salmon come from? Know where your food came from was the most important thing that we felt customers should know.
In industry, they buy cans of pistachio paste, they open the cans, they don't know where it's come from, and they buy it. Well, you know what? A little secret is that if you take the time to know your farmers, your local producers in BC from around the world and work with them, when you bring the product in, you can make it at even a better price.
You buy a pack of hot dogs for $7, it actually works out more per pound for hot dogs than it does for a wild salmon. And when you look at it that way, I've always looked at that and thought, boy, this is something wrong with this system. It really is.
Very few people in this world control most of the food, which in itself is a scary situation. But the card that they always try to trump logic with is that there's so many hungry people that we can't feed the world. We need to produce more and we need to produce it cheaper. It's the biggest load of crock that's ever been spun into gold on this planet, because it's not true. We produce enough food. It's the way it's distributed. We could be more efficient. And harming our environment to create lesser quality products simply to fill bellies is not a sustainable option. We are going to hit a wall. Very, very, hopefully not in my lifetime, but we are going to hit a wall.
As the world wants to eat healthier, they turn to the oceans. And there's a big controversy as far as wild seafood, farm fish. And we're really trying to tell people, there's a difference. The farm fish is readily available year-round. However, there is a heavy environmental impact with the fish farms doing a lot of damage to our wild stocks, and we're trying to really change that. And I'm very proud to say that a lot of the people, both the restaurants and the average consumer, they know the difference now.
It makes no sense to me as a person to be farming Atlantic salmon in open net pens in British Columbian waters. I mean, there's so many other ways it can be done, and it is being done. There's a farm in Agassiz that farms coho, for instance, and our restaurants support him with Swift Aquaculture. Now he's doing it in what we consider to be a very sustainable manner, because the mere fact that the fish aren't being farmed in the ocean eliminates probably 4 of the 5 major issues. And the great thing about his farm is he uses the water off from his fish tanks and the effluent, and he farms wasabi, and he farms beans and watercress and peas and edible flowers and apples and all these things we buy from him as well. And it's the perfect, for me, it's the perfect system.
We supply the people and the restaurants. It's no longer selling our fish to these big corporate companies, and they don't know, I don't even know where these fish go. Now with what we do, we pretty much sell most of our fish to the restaurants across Canada. And we actually now can trace our fish from our boat onto a plate in a restaurant in Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, all across Canada.
The last thing to go local were the chefs. The ingredients were local, but now the new, young, emerging chefs, thanks to people like Rob Clark and John Bishop, are local too.
At Range City with our 100-mile menu, the idea that's there to create parameters for which the chefs need to create, and forces them, to do something more with a carrot than put butter and honey on it, and it forces them to search out and find local producers.
Locality isn't necessarily a perfect thing. It's a good thing as an overall trend to try and bring things locally. They're delicious, and we should support our local farmers. But I've seen some examples that just carry it too far.
the concept isn't about you should never eat a banana or a pineapple or these types of things, eliminate them from the diet. That's not the point of eating local. What's eating local is supporting those that are producing our food and encouraging others to get into it.
My father ran the first ever string of hot dog stands in Vancouver many years ago. It was pretty radical at the time, and he certainly had his fair share of problems at City Hall. But today, street food is thriving, and there's no way the bureaucrats are going to curb this international trend.
You look at the popularity of something like Go Fish, that's just simple seafood in a hut and it's on the seawall, and there's a number of things that make it successful. But you know, it's especially in today's world, it's less and less about fancy food. I think Japadogs is a great example of, you know, I mean, they only did a hot dog cart because, you know, at the time and still today, and it's changing now finally with this pilot program, but the only thing you could serve out of carts were hot dogs. So the Japadog, you know, guy came to Vancouver, wanted to do sort of Japanese street food. It probably would have been takoyaki or different, you know, Japanese street food offerings, and couldn't. So he kind of took a lot of those flavors and put them on a hot dog.
During Expo 86, when the different provincial pavilions were, you'll recall, kind of competing in a friendly way. And the whole notion of your regionality came to bear. So the Saskatchewan pavilion had a really strong food program, and they brought their fish in, their Saskatoon Perries for pie. And all of a sudden the BC guys say, we've got to invent something that isn't called salmon. What else can we do with our local stuff? John Bishop was a progenitor of that. He really got it kicked up. And that's where really this modern era of regional cooking in BC stemmed from.
When I arrived in British Columbia, every restaurant in this city had BC salmon with cream dill sauce on it. Every ounce of that salmon was farmed Atlantic. None of it was wild BC salmon. It was all farmed Atlantic salmon.
I've been fishing for 30 years now, and when I started back in the 80s, it was like the Wild West out there. You know, there wasn't many rules or regulations, and it was almost a free-for-all. Nowadays, we are probably the most, we're definitely a forerunner in sustainable fishing here on the BC coast. A lot of people didn't like it because there's so much rules and regulations. I love it. I want to fish for another 30 years, and I want to see these fish keep coming back like this. And the way we can do it is if we control our fisheries.
My father, in particular, when it comes to harvesting nature's bounty, he didn't say you need to do it like this or be unsustainable or anything. He just said, you know what, you don't take more than you need. I mean, he could have taken as many salmon as he wanted out of those rivers, but he never took more than 2. One thing that sticks out in my mind was, I don't know, I was 8 or 10 years old or whatever, and it was a particularly good fishing day, and my grandfather had caught his, and my father had caught his, and my uncle had caught his. And it's like, okay, well, there's lots of salmon, you know, let's go get me. Like, and I'm down with my friends playing softball or something, and he's going, you know what, you need to learn to catch salmon, there's lots of salmon, come and start fishing. Instead of, like, I had a license, so he could have taken my 2 salmon, and it would have been, okay, the family gets 8 fish that day. But it was wrong for him to catch more than what he was allowed to catch.
Caspian sturgeon, especially in Russia, it's like cocaine. People kill each other over one fish. It's so valuable because it's so rare, and the fish is commercially extirpated now. It's essentially extinct.
We did make a business decision about 3 years, 1999, I guess. So we opened in 97. 1999, we did make a very conscious decision because we were being labeled as being responsible and efforts, but we weren't 100% doing the right thing. We were still doing things that I would not even conceive of doing today. Serving Chilean sea bass, for instance, is one of them. And we sat down, we had a meeting, and all the managers were around, and we talked about, okay, are we going to jump in with everybody's saying this is what we're doing. We know we could do a lot better than what we're doing. Are we going to put our, I guess, the business on the line and go, let's start taking like farmed tiger prawns from Southeast Asia off the menu. I mean, taking shrimp off a menu is suicidal if you have a seafood. I mean, everybody comes in, 50% of what you sell is shrimp.
With the spot prawn fishery, you know, we're making sure 100% of their catch gets consumed in this province now at our member restaurants and elsewhere, instead of being flown to Japan every day in the belly of a 747. And it's caught. You can see from his restaurant where they're caught in Howe Sound.
Well, there's 4 criteria that most organizations use to determine if something's sustainable or not, and a strong management plan or program for the fishery needs to be in place. I don't know if Chilean sea bass is endangered. It's not. Different issues surround different seafoods to determine whether we should be serving them or not. So something like a bluefin tuna is the numbers are so low we shouldn't be eating bluefin tuna. Chilean sea bass, the numbers could very well be strong, but there's no management in place. I mean, I can't say the majority, but a huge percentage of Chilean sea bass that's actually served in the world is poached.
Foie gras is a different issue. It's about one of animal cruelty. And I'm always amazed by how many people have a really polarized opinion. I'm pro or con foie gras without ever actually having gone to see an operation themselves.
Human nature being what it is, we usually don't pay attention to a problem unless it's affecting us directly. But with globalization, we can see the results of depleting our resources in other less fortunate countries. So it's up to us to pay attention and apply what we learn to our situation.
Every mangrove forest legally allowed to be touched in Asia has already been decimated. There are still mangrove forests. They're in marine reserves or parks or whatever, but essentially anywhere somebody could farm shrimp, they have farmed it. And they've totally annihilated that environment, and now they're moving on land. And what they're doing is they're taking up rice paddies. So at some point, we've essentially eliminated the ability of most third world countries to feed themselves seafood because of farming practices, or some farming practices, or improper farming practices, probably better. And now those farms are now being moved onto land, and they're taking up rice paddies. So at some point, they're not even going to be able to produce enough rice to feed themselves.
It's obviously a lot more expensive for them to do it on land.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's these big corporate companies. You know, they think, well, we can save a buck here and there. They don't really think about all the rest of the people that are living off the ocean. You know, the fishermen and other people, ecotourism, the whole works. We're all seeing the damage out there caused by the fish farms.
Food is fashion as well as nourishment. So let the trends commence. Currently we have the 100-mile diet where everything you eat is local. That's fun, if a little extreme. I mean, I love my pink grapefruit from California. I don't want to replace it with a turnip. And raw, oh yes. Led by celebrities like fashion designer Donna Karan, the raw diet is the new status symbol, complete with the requisite celebrity endorsements, very strict rules, very large coffee table book, and impossible recipes.
Especially with blogging these days too. I mean, everyone's sort of a food critic and become very good food critics. But yeah, in terms of people's actual cooking skills and ability, I don't know if that's improved.
There was a lot of confusion with the whole fusion thing, trying to force things together that don't belong. But at the end of the day, and some things can be taken as an experience, especially in the food. Oh, this is very artistic, it's very creative, I like the taste of it. Would I order it again? No. Do I like clear glass noodles that taste like strawberries? Oh, that's cool. It was fun. But you know, it's nothing that will last.
Following recipes for me is like, I'd rather go to the dentist. I mean, there's no way I can sit there in my kitchen and read a recipe and measure things out. It's just so painful for me to do.
Truffles and asparagus go together. Every chef will put truffles and asparagus, truffles and cream. I mean, saffron and cream. Like all these things, we maybe change the look on the plate. Maybe we manipulate it in a way that somebody hasn't seen before. The whole deconstruct this and deconstruct that, but the flavor profiles are still. There's things that go together. Basil and tomatoes go together. There's just nothing you can do about that. They grow together, they go together. That's what James used to say, James Barber. That's essentially how all regional food was produced before we started mass producing and shipping all over the world. A perfect example even in Canada. So as a boy, when the men were fishing, the women and the children were on the side of the river harvesting fiddleheads and salmon go together.
Generally speaking, if you know what you like in terms of flavors and textures, you know, you can really take any recipe and make it even better. So,
to enlighten us even further, here's our own mad about food, Patrick Malia, to give his opinion on the food we eat.
People talk about genetically modified foods like they're a bad thing. People keep going on about how there's too many human growth hormones in our foods and it's affecting our children. They call them franken-foods with all the cross-pollination and whatever the heck you want to call it that they get done. How kids are growing up way too fast. Well, I've got news for you. I want there to be human growth hormone in my kids' food. I want my son to eat so many hamburgers and steaks that by the time he's an adult, he's 6'11", and people think that they've shaved a Sasquatch and put it back into society. And by the way, if I have to hear one more person tell me that they're a foodie, I'm a foodie, and talk about how food is like sex, I'm gonna lose my foodie mind. I'll tell you this right now. You know what's like sex? Sex! And you know what's like food? Food! Last time I checked, food was just something that filled a hole in a void. Yes, that may relate to sex in a certain way, but that's a different show entirely. Okay, I get it. You got a walnut oil from some remote island that has never been touched by human hands, and that's gone onto your ridiculous side salad with just a touch of arrogance. Wonderful, fine, and brilliant. All I want to know is this. When I eat it, will I be full? You blog about it all the time. You talk about it. Food has become porn. That's what's ended up happening. People are sexualizing their food. I'm an old-fashioned guy. The only things I love when it comes to food are hot dogs, hamburgers, and Hilton Sisters covered in soy sauce. I don't want to hear about the texture and the taste and the flavor and how it was like an orgasm in your mouth after you bit into that piece of pie. I'm a foodie, and let me tell you something about the texture of this food. It was absolutely amazing. Oh my God, it was like an orgasm in my mouth. Whatever. The only food I found even remotely sexual was a plate of calamari. Don't get me wrong. If you got a $100 gift certificate to a gourmet restaurant and you're inviting me, I will go there. Unless, of course, they don't serve hamburger. Until next time, I'm Patrick Maliha.
For every Obi-Wan Kenobi, there's a Darth Vader. And even the virtuous and profitable goal of developing a wine industry for BC has its dark side.
The wine industry in British Columbia is phenomenal. I mean, what we're doing, what we've done, what we've accomplished is phenomenal. My only reservation is the fact that we're losing a lot of stone fruit, apples, peaches, cherries, plums. Those types of orchards are being torn up because they can make more money producing grapes than they can be producing that. So like anything, moderation is good, right? I wouldn't want to see the wine industry in British Columbia get too big. We need to be eating local apples instead of apples from New Zealand. If we want apples in January and we haven't cellared our own, we should be eating apple preserve or apple butter or apple compote or frozen apples or whatever from BC trees, not this necessity of fresh is crazy.
We should follow the seasons. When cherry's in season, we should serve cherry. There's strawberries in December just don't seem to work for anybody. You know, they look red, but they taste white.
I like the idea of eating what's in season. I like changing your menu depending on the seasons. I don't want to eat strawberries in November. You know, I want to eat them in the summer. I want to be having stews and vegetables and things like that in the winter and enjoying the stuff that's local here in the summer. I think it's really important.
So we would sooner have a tasteless fresh apple in February opposed to a really tasty apple in October or September, and take those tasty apples and what we can eat fresh, preserve them for excellent tasting applesauce or freeze. I mean, we have so many techniques to preserve quality and flavor. There's no need to eat inferior. You're depressing me now.
The irony of our bounteous good fortune in North America is that as we get richer, our diet gets poorer. Agribusiness and fast food gave us economies of scale and food with no nutrition. Even farm produce was rendered toxic with pesticides, and chicken and meat were laced with antibiotics and hormones. But things are changing. A whole new generation is discovering the joy of farming and animal husbandry, taking their inspiration from the ways of the past and turning out wholesome organic food. So don't get upset, Robert. I promise you that this winter I'm going to be slapping that apple butter on my toast. And no tasteless imported winter apples are going to be gracing my table, not even at Christmas. Oh yes, I'm a convert to a moderate, informed, sustainable approach to the food I serve in my house. I'm Pia Shandel. Thanks for joining us.